Welcome to Book to Where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livia Snedden. No book review this week. As punishment, really, for you, the listeners, for most of the listeners now. Gave a status update to catch you up in the event that you didn't follow this saga. I'll kind of go into it right now. So I thought that it would be good idea is probably not the right word. That it would be productive for us to review the new E.L. James book, The Mister. To which Rob then said,
No way.
For the first time in booked history.
Yeah, that's the first time I put my foot down, yeah.
Yeah, like we both pretty much mutually agree to some things we don't want to do. You know what I mean? Like Haruki Murakami, if that comes up, I always send it to Rob kind of as a joke because I know he's going to say no and I'm not really interested. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we had come to an agreement on that episode that if I found someone else to review it with me, that would be cool. And that Rob would not participate in that episode. It would just be a review with me and somebody else. And I thought to myself, well, all right, so here's what would be fun. We'll put it out there for the listeners. Because I personally could have reached out to people, and I'm sure I wouldn't have had to send more than 2 or 3 emails before I got someone to agree to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the response was, how many people responded that first week?
0 people responded.
0 people responded, which was disappointing, to say the least. So I went on a little bit of a rant, and then the applications started flooding in. So after I got really upset, people took me seriously. I think maybe they weren't serious, thought I wasn't serious the first time.
I didn't think you were serious the first time.
Exactly. So Rob and I sorted through all of the interested parties that wanted to do this, and we settled on the one that was the most qualified, right, Rob?
Yes, by far.
Yes. And that person, who's also the only person who volunteered, is Dino Parenti.
Yeah, good old Dino. Longtime friend of the podcast, and I was lucky enough to meet him in LA 2016. Actually at I don't know if you remember, so that was like the 5th anniversary of Booked, and even though you weren't out there, Livius, we did like a co-party with Lit Reactor. And
yeah,
it was
I remember.
Partially like our 5th anniversary party. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was there. We like met and hung out and everything. It was really cool. It's like the nicest dude, very enthusiastic, and like he's like, talking to him was one of those experiences where when we're not recording the podcast or like posting stuff for the podcast, it doesn't really occur to me that people listen to it and think about it. And so when he would talk, when I was talking to him, he's talking about what he likes about the podcast and stuff. I was like, oh, he listens. You know, it's one of those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
But yeah, super nice guy. Way more energy than me. So I'm interested to see how that translates into the review.
I don't know Dino at all, except that we travel in the same online social circles. So I'm looking very forward to spending some time with him. You said he was really upbeat and enthusiastic, and I'm thinking, man, I wonder if reading this book will beat that right out of him. Like if I'm just going to get a guy that's shattered.
Barely beat it out of him.
The
like, is this like a 50 Shades, like BDSM kind of beat it out of him, or?
It could be.
Oh, I have to wait for the review. Yeah,
you'll have to wait for the review. Exactly. So I will say, without divulging anything else, as the time of this recording, 8:03 p.m. Central Standard Time on May 7th, I am 82% of the way into this 500-page book.
Ugh.
So, but see, that's the problem. Right before the podcast, we were talking about Joe Hill's new book, right?
Yep.
It's coming out in October or whatever. And I said, hey, we should get on this and see about getting a copy of this. And Rob goes, all right, yeah, okay, this book. And I go, yeah. And he goes, ah, shit, man, this is 500 pages. So I don't know that it wasn't that you didn't want to read more E.L. James. It might have just been that there's something about that number that puts you off.
Yeah, I mean, just back in the day, like your Dickenses aside, like people had the decency to keep the book short, right? Like 200 pages in and out, you're done.
I don't know if that was back in those days. I think that might have been a much more modern era thing.
Well, in my mind.
Okay. Because I was thinking, like, we just did the Three Musketeers, and that was a
that was like
monstrosity,
700,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a wonderful book, but it was really long. And I think back to, the other stuff I've read from Dumas, which is really the only stuff I've read from that time period, sadly, and they're all pretty lengthy.
All right.
Yeah.
So at some point there was a golden age that I was not alive for, where books were short. Men were men and books were short. Or whatever,
Sure, yeah. I'm not really sure, but look, the trade-off is we did talk about Mark Z. Danielewski's new book that's coming out by the end of the year, right? And that one's only 90 pages, so that'll be the trade-off for doing a 500-page Joe Hill, is we'll get to do a 90-page Danielewski.
Yeah, that averages down in like a much better average page count for sure.
So anyway, I'm very excited to do this with Dino next week. Rob will not be present. Although Rob may be on the recording, it's going to be just me and Dino, which is going to give us a lot of opportunity to shit talk people who weren't willing to read this book. That's all I'm saying, Rob.
I will say that now that we're talking about people who like the outpouring of volunteers, we did on the previous episode cajole Thomas Joyce about it, and he very enthusiastically replied that he was not interested in reading it. So.
Very, very. I'm honestly surprised, because after I announced that we had a co-host for it, then I got a couple of people who were like, "Oh, I would have done it," and all I kept thinking is, "Well, you should listen to the fucking podcast then, because you had two opportunities to step up and you didn't." So it is what it is.
Where were you? So yeah, very excited to. So we had the episode where me and Ryan, the marketing intern, drove around talking about stuff on our way to pick up beer that Livius wasn't on, but that was essentially an interlude. Livius will now, for the foreseeable future, always be one book review ahead of me, until I find something that's so repulsive to Livius that he insists I review it with some other unnamed party.
I don't see, Rob. I take my craft very seriously in reviewing books, so I don't think that'll happen.
Well, time will tell on that one, but
Bjork has a book out, and I'm like, I can't take the screechy, crazy shit. Yeah.
Well, can we talk a little bit about the craft of reviews?
Yes, right. I'd love to. I'm guessing you have something in mind.
Yeah, so I mentioned this briefly to you before we got started, but there's been something that, a topic amongst our author friends that, it came up, I want to say, within the last 6 to 8 months, and we kind of offhandedly have a conversation about it. I don't know if you remember. And it's boiling back up again, and since it's come up several times, it got to the point where I was about to start typing a response on social media. And so I was like...
I know that feeling. Like... And then if you have that feeling, like the thought that you had, because you said I was about to start type, it's usually best just not to.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like one of two things. And I know I'm dragging this out because I haven't even told anybody what we're talking about yet. One of the two things was going to happen was I was either going to give a very well thought out and informed opinion as an expert on the topic that no one would care about, or I'd get mired into some asinine argument. And I didn't like either option, so instead I decided let's bring it to the medium where I have complete control. And I completely guide the conversation on this, right? And then no one can do anything about it. So far this is sounding brilliant, right?
Right. Yeah. Especially you should go on with the topic at hand. I think that people will appreciate my laughter a little more after that.
So the topic that came up a few months ago, and then also just resurfaced for me, was the idea that people who do book reviews should not tag authors on social media in their negative reviews of their books.
That's an interesting one, man. And this is like going to be like spoiler talk for a current event, because I'm not sure where I stand on that. Like, I have a personal feeling about like how I would feel about it, assuming like I don't write books, right? But if someone were to review our podcast or comment on it. Mm-hmm. So,
do you want me to give you
this? Sure, yeah.
I'll hit you with the lowdown of what I know. So, first of all, I saw Chuck Wendig on Facebook had posted an article he wrote on his website talking about tagging authors in your negative reviews, and it was in reference to a Book Riot article by Abby Hargraves that was written May 6th, so just the day before we were recording this. So this is fresh. This is some piping hot tea, like the kids say.
So let me see if Chuck Wendig was like you, only he actually wrote out the thing.
Wait, what?
Like he saw something.
Yes,
he saw something
exactly.
on the 6th, and he was like, "God damn it, I have to respond to this right now."
So here's the interesting thing: Abby Hargraves. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll paraphrase here and there. Unpopular opinion: tagging authors in negative reviews is the name of the article, and the essence of it is that she doesn't tag authors in her negative reviews, but she doesn't think it's a big deal. And then she goes on to explain, and I encourage anybody who has an opinion one way or another on this should probably read her article. But she goes on to essentially say, and apologize if I don't get it exactly right, I'm writing stuff not about the author, but about the book. So the stuff that I'm writing is about the quality of the story, the plot, the characters, blah, blah, blah. And so the author shouldn't take it personally. And then after that, she goes on to say, one of the points that I thought was interesting was, I tag the authors for the information of the readers, not so that the authors are aware of the article. So the basic idea, this person's a librarian, and she says if I'm reviewing a book and I have something negative to say, it's about something about the content of the book, but I want my readers to be as informed as possible, so I'm tagging the author so they have access to more information. Okay.
I see her point.
Yeah. Chuck's response was it was not necessarily a counterpoint. Chuck's response was basically in typical Chuck Wendig fashion, far more entertaining than I'll be about it. But he essentially said that it's just kind of poor form to criticize something and then essentially by tagging make the author aware of it so that they not have to read it, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like rubbing it in their face almost. And so he was very clear to say you should, if you don't like a book, write a negative review about it. But just bringing it to the attention of the author is the kind of just poor form.
All right, I have some pretty immediate thoughts on this. I totally see where Abby is coming from. Mm-hmm. But I'm probably Team Chuck on this one. I definitely think you should write a review. And look, from somebody who has spent now over the course of the last 5 weeks, I bought a car, so I watch a ton of reviews on cars. I read reviews for other things I want to buy. I go on Amazon, right? I pull something up, and typically I do the thing where I just go to the poor reviews, so I can find out, if the item is faulty or whatever. So, but I guess at no point would I buy something, use it, have it be shitty, and then tag the engineer that designed it.
It's weird because that's almost exactly like the point that Chuck was making. Mm-hmm. And that it's incredibly valid is it's you're not going to be you're not going to look through patent filings and stuff like that.
No, yeah.
All these legal paperwork to find out who is the exact person who made your,
And the more I think about it, I think where Abby might be a little off is that it's 2019. I don't mean this to sound as shitty as it's going to sound, but if I have the name of an author in the book, I don't need the direction to get to the author. I can Google that stuff. I mean, what do we do? What did we do right before we got on this podcast? We looked up 4 different books on Amazon.
Yeah.
We had the author's name, and that was enough for us to, to figure, without having someone point and say, here, it's right here. Here's where you need to go if you want to find out more information. You can find out the information without being directed to the author's Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, whatever page.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where I land on it too. Other people who have weighed in outside of I didn't really forage through the comments on social media, but separately. So I noticed the Wendig article earlier today. Separately, I was scrolling through Twitter, I believe, and that's where Paul Tremblay kind of does more stuff on Twitter than Facebook, and he had mentioned it too, and it might have been just in response to Wendig's article. And I remember Paul was one of the people back, like, whatever, 6 or 8 months ago when it came up before, that had something to say about it, and he was pretty much aligned with Chuck on it. So interestingly, if you remember, John Horner Jacobs, he went on to give an anecdote about an instance where in a review, the person reviewing his book made a comment about his appearance, like he was a burly dude or something like that, and like that somehow factored into what they were talking about the book, which just sounds weird. But then it made me think about an instance where you criticize someone's haircut.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I didn't feel that I really liked that book.
Yeah.
The haircut, not so much, but I wasn't attributing the book qualities to his haircut.
Also, the haircut didn't impact the stars that you gave to the review, so
that's true.
But yeah, like, so it really made me think about, I think that part of our impartiality and objectivity, that's a better word, when it comes to posting our reviews and stuff, is we are 100% universal in the way that we review stuff, mostly because we post our reviews. It's an automated thing. When a link shows up on our website, all these social media things just get kicked out that link. And so there's nothing personalized about it. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, we don't tag any author because it's automated. Yeah. Except sometimes we really celebrate something that we really, really enjoyed, and we do additional posting, and we're like, hey, we love this thing, so-and-so. And you know, like Josh Mellerman, we like him a lot. Maybe we'll tag him in an extra post or something.
Sure. Yeah, I tagged Soya Stage for Baby Teeth, which is my favorite book of last year. So I thought she should know that because that's how high quality I thought the book was. So, yeah, I've never done that, and I wouldn't do it to someone negatively. I mean, I think what it comes down to is this, and the one reason that like a product versus a book is different, and I guess I can't say this universally. I don't know that some guy at Samsung didn't pour like his blood, sweat, and tears into the newest TV. You know, but when you think author writing, it's a solitary thing, and they're hunkered down in a room, and it's probably kind of dark, and they've just got some coffee, and they chain smoke, and they put their words on a page. So I think it's like a little more personal than the guy that, you know, designed the Dyson vacuum, or you know what I mean? Insert item here. Typically, I'm assuming, with the exception of the Dyson guy, because he's famous for inventing a vacuum, right? Like, it's a team of people, and no one person is really responsible for anything. But you know what I'm saying? I think it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And like tagging a director for a movie that sucks. Like, someone handed him a script, somebody else hired a bunch of people to do it, and they're like, "Here, make this work."
Right.
So versus it being 100% all you, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on the page, months, years, maybe, of your work, for someone to be like, "Hey, here's what I thought of your book, fuckface."
Yeah, the book that you didn't ask me to read. So I just found it was something that had come up enough times that I thought as reviewers it would warrant our kind of discussion, or at least our putting our official kind of thought on where we stand on that. And I think that we have always tried to be as fair as possible to authors, meaning sometimes we'll say negative things about, maybe we'll get a little personal too about, our objections to a book, but we'll never just like rub it in your face. The only problem comes in is like, if we have a really negative response to a book that someone who we're close to wrote, and we publish that review, regardless of what goes on, they're probably going to find it. And
and that's another thought I had too. Like, what author doesn't have like a Google keyword setup thing, where they get pinged every single time somebody writes something about them? I mean, we have the luxury of literally picking what we want to do.
Yeah.
As far as books go. So there's a handful of times, I mean, James Patterson, that I think of where we really went into a book, and I always go in open-minded, But those books, we were like, all right, we're going to read 50 Shades of Grey. And my expectation was I'm probably not going to like this very much, just from things I'd heard or whatever, right? Patterson, the Zoo, the co-writing, co-authoring program, whatever he called, you know what I mean? Like, we kind of went into them not expecting the best thing. You and I just went through a list of books we want to do for the remainder of the year. And like 80% of the books we talked about, I'm like really excited about. So I expect, because we've read other work by the people or whatever, like I expect a certain quality. But that also makes it harder when it's not as good as you'd hoped. The Christopher Golden book we did last week is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
That book kind of came in a little low, and it was more disappointing than if that was somebody we'd never read before, or something that was sent to us by a publisher that we decided to do, because then I have no expectations. Then I expect I'm going to read a book. Not I'm going to read a book by a guy whose work I really like that just doesn't hit the mark.
Right. Yeah. So, and ultimately, like, we have final control over whether, like, if a review just goes really horribly and we know it's just going to do more bad than good, we can just say, oh, we're going to skip this, and like we waste a little time, but whatever. But in general, man, like, I'm kind of neutral on the whole, like, how authors should be treated thing. But I mean, the conversation should be about, like, the effect of the book, not about, like, the quality or character of the author or anything like that. It should never be a personal attack. So I know that authors probably had their feelings hurt by us, and obviously not the intention, but sometimes it's going to happen. But like, I think as long as you stick to the conversation being about the impact of what you read, and then following that pretty general, I mean, honestly, if you want to avoid getting in trouble with authors, just do what we do and automate your social media so that you never actually need to personalize anything, and you don't have to worry about it at all.
Yeah, that is very true. It's interesting. I just, well, like the thought that, like I said, we do this, and I don't really think to myself, well, Christopher Golden's going to hear this review. There are times, because there are people that we're close with that I know they're waiting for a review. They've asked for a review, right? We're in a email conversation, pretty much right now with somebody who's working really hard to get us our copies. So if you don't think that guy's working to get us our copies, you don't think he's going to listen to the review when we do it?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure he's going to listen to it, which is why I also, if you guys have noticed, we never have an author on before we review their book. I don't think we ever have. It's always post-review.
It's always after, yeah.
And it's two reasons. So first of all, we don't want to have someone on and then shit on their book if their book is worth shitting on. Second of all, like, we have questions that come up because we read the book. Mm-hmm. And then we can't, go back 2 weeks in time to when we had the author on and ask them those questions. So it's always best to do it later. And then they also have that kind of right of first refusal, right? Like, they listen to it and they're like, yeah, I don't want to talk to you guys. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, it's a courtesy to just be like,
sure.
Hey, you can listen to the review and decide whether or not talking to us is what you want to do.
Unless you're David James Keaton, then we make you review your own book.
Yeah, I think that he knows we're going to like everything he writes, though. So
it's hard not to like Keaton stuff. Yeah. So anyway,
so that's an interesting thought. Like, I'm glad that came up, and I'm glad that I held back from diving into the social media conversation, because obviously it's superior when you can just say what you want without fear of any kind of response.
Right. So if you have thoughts on what we just said, don't fucking tag Robin, or he doesn't care. Which is why I was laughing, because when you're rolling this out, I'm like, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
You want to have a statement that no one could respond to. So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, I tried to apply that to myself, and if some, and I feel like I'm morbidly curious. Like, if someone thought that our podcast was really bad, I would be more curious just to hear. I'd want to dig into it.
Well, it comes back to that thing, right? So as a constructive, so we've gotten the one criticism that we've had more than once is length of episode.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, we leaned into that They said shorter episodes, and I think that's when we started going an hour plus, because that's how much we listen. Like, we love what we do, and we talk for as long as it's fun for us to talk.
Yep.
And, you know, sometimes that tonight might only be 40 minutes. Next week might be 2+ hours. Like, it just depends on what's going on. So if it was constructive criticism, I'd listen to it. I think by and large, our listeners like the format that we do, because we haven't heard a lot. So I've had 2 people I'm aware of tell us the podcast is too long in 8 years. So either there's a lot of people out there who think the podcast is just long enough, or they just they're not bothered enough to comment.
They have no opinion on it. Yeah.
What was that one that we dug up? We dug up that review one time.
Yeah. It was on iTunes where it said, we say some things about women that are tough to stomach, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even disagree with that review, but I was glad to read it. Like, I wasn't sad about it.
It's, to me, I need specificity, because like that's not enough for me to like really know, to get to the bottom of it. You know what I'm saying?
No.
It's too general for me to be able to act on anything.
Correct.
But that being said, feedback, man. If you want to, you can @ me so that you can spare Livius's feelings, because I kind of kicked up this dust storm. We'd love to hear what you think about the podcast, good or bad. We're not like out there looking for praise, because we're so happy doing it regardless of whether we hear from you or not. But like, if you have even a minor, like, you know, suggestion or request or something like that, but like, man, if you've just been holding back a torrent of negativity, I'm so interested to hear what that would be like.
If you've been holding back a torrent of negativity, get in touch with me and we will put you on a goddamn episode.
Yeah.
We'll be happy to
We'll make you a co-host.
Yeah, we'll be happy to talk to you about it. And I only say that like half jokingly.
No, I would totally endorse that.
Yeah, I would be okay with that. So
yeah.
At any rate, we'll see if we can get as many responses as we did to my request for someone to review the Mister on this one. So,
well, I think I might have found a book that I can get a co-host on that you won't touch.
Which is what?
I was just because like we just said a minute ago, we were on Amazon looking at books that we were thinking about doing for the podcast, and this was one of the customers who bought this, or sponsored products, you know, based on whatever Amazon does.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that is that it's a sequel.
Yeah. So this is a little bit, and we're discovering this as we talk, but I saw big letters, Michael Crichton, The Andromeda Evolution. And I know that Andromeda Strain, right, was the original from a long time ago. And I'm not too familiar with it, but I know that it's like a very famous book, right?
Oh, yeah. Came out 50 goddamn years ago. I think that was one of Michael Crichton's first books, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And to my knowledge, Michael Crichton is not alive. Right?
I'm not sure, but while you're talking, I'm sure I can find out.
So here's what's going on. While Livius is trying to make me look like a fool, this is a novel written by author Daniel H. Wilson. Now, anybody who hasn't gone as far back in time as Thomas Joyce and started listening to us in the 80s, the episodes in the 80s, Daniel H. Wilson, we have reviewed 3 times now. Robopocalypse, there was one called Amped, and then there was Robogenesis. And they're all kind of like tech thriller, kind of like AI robot shit. And they were all garbage.
I didn't even remember we reviewed 3 of them. I was waiting to hear what the third one is. I was like, nope, I'm still calling it 2 because I don't know what you're talking about. And
the funny thing about that is when we were when I told you we were going to review the third one, you're like, we read 2? So,
yeah.
So, yeah, he wrote a sequel to the Andromeda Strain. I don't know how I feel about this.
I mean, the tough part about I wouldn't be opposed to reading it, so I want to correct you there. The problem is, like, how do you read a sequel to like a legendary book without knowing
reading the original?
Yeah, I mean, we've done it. We've done some sequels. Just last week, the Pandora
Room.
Oh, the Pandora Room. I was Jar Box Room. The Pandora Room was a sequel, although I was not aware of that, and it was very loosely a sequel. I would have to imagine this is probably tied a little more strongly to the source material.
Yeah, techno thriller novel by Michael Crichton documenting efforts of a team of scientists investigating the outbreak of a deadly extraterrestrial microorganism in Arizona. And now, 50 years after the Andromeda strain made Michael Crichton a household name and spawned a new genre, the techno thriller, the threat returns in a gripping sequel that is terrifyingly realistic and resonant.
Resonant. Can I just say that Michael Crichton is no longer with us since 2008?
So, yeah.
That guy was 6'9", 6 feet 9 inches tall.
Michael Crichton was?
Yeah, which is a really weird thing because I'll bet you that there aren't a lot of other authors whose height is listed in that little side box on Google.
Right.
Like, I don't think it's just a lot of 5'8".
Well,
I've got to know.
I'm going to look Daniel H. Wilson up.
I'll look up Stephen King. He's pretty famous.
No, I have his birthday, but not.
Stephen King, 6'4". Apparently,
Man, these authors are all tall.
Yeah, if you're over 6 feet tall, you get your height listed. Which that's important for basketball players, right? Maybe models. But Paul Tremblay, no height listed, and he's a tall guy.
He is tall too.
Yeah.
Josh Mallerman, no height listed, very tall.
All right. So here we go. How do I get my height listed on Google? Because I'm going to start doing this for authors whose height isn't listed. I'm just going to start sending out messages. Hey, man, how tall are you?
Wait, who's a really short author that we are aware of?
Wait, you don't want to say a short author's name on the podcast. That's like tagging them in a negative review.
That's true.
Yeah, my initial Google search did not come up with the answer I'd hoped for.
Huh.
It must pull it from Wikipedia, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that sidebar is all Wikipedia.
So it has to be, you have to have a significant enough article on Wikipedia, I'm guessing.
Well, so, Rob, you have some time off. I think you should take on the task of updating the Wikipedia for all these authors whose height isn't listed.
Hold on. James Patterson. No height listed. Look it up. See, double check on your computer. I want to make sure that. I don't know why it would be different.
James Patterson. It is a Wikipedia article. No height listed.
It's because he's a shorty. I bet you he's a shorty. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to spend I got some vacation time. I got a little week and a half coming up, and I'm just gonna even the odds for the short authors.
You should. It's not fair. It's not fair.
Yeah, it's heightest.
The problem I have with this conversation is that now I'm just going to start wondering how tall authors are. If I Google them and it doesn't come up on the sidebar, I'm just going to be like, man, I wonder how tall this guy is. I wonder how short this guy is.
What if we we had a height requirement for our book reviews? You must be this tall. Haruki Murakami is not tall enough to be reviewed by us, is what I'm trying to say.
You mean like a girl on Tinder?
Yeah, we're a girl on Tinder. You must be over 6 feet tall in order to get reviewed by us.
That's correct.
We're also looking for sugar daddies.
Sorry, Aaron Morgenstern. I don't think you cut it.
Fuck that. We're definitely reading her next book.
We are. I pulled her up to see if her height was there as the first woman's author's name that came to mind. And in her picture, and it's just like a head and shoulder shot, but I'm like, yeah, she doesn't look very tall.
You're just judging her. So that's exciting news, though. Her we reviewed the Night Circus. It was probably in the 50s, 52.
The 1950s, what?
Back in the 1950s, in the episodes in the 50s, yes. Sub 100. And The Starless Sea comes out in November, so I'm very excited about that.
That book was so goddamn good, too, man.
I wonder now, if we went back and reviewed it, 7 years later, would we think differently of it, having gone through so many books since then? The Polinick conundrum is what I'm going to call this.
Yeah, I doubt it. I honestly doubt it.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, look, I'm arguing with you about how many Daniel Wilson books we've reviewed, and I still remember The Night Circus like it was, months ago.
It's a strong testament. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So
I might hook you into reading in November Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Evolution, not written by Michael Crichton.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that sucks about that too is like, obviously someone owns the rights to that. Like, yeah. Michael Crichton did not sign off on this, which also makes it a little tough.
Yeah, a little hinky. It's
like I haven't read the girl in the spider's web. I see it. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah. Every time I see it, I think, man, I should read that because I like the other 3 books. And I'm like, no, man, like that dude died, and I don't know. You know.
Did I tell you I watched that movie?
There's a movie of it?
The Girl in the Spider's Web, yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't know. We did not talk about this. Let's talk about this. Was it any good?
Not really. Let me ask you, because you read all 3 of the original Millennium Trilogy books, right?
Yes.
Did Elizabeth Salander have a sister? Elizabeth, sorry.
Not that I remember. I mean, if she did, it wasn't like a character in the book. I don't know if in passing it was mentioned. You know what I mean? But no, not as an active participant in any of the books.
Well, she did in this.
Oh, all right. I think I know everything I need to know.
Yeah. If you have an unhappy sister, those 2 words is going to tell you everything you need to know.
Hey, speaking of books I walked past and see, I was in let me back up a little bit. I have nothing but the utmost respect for bookstores and libraries. I want to start by saying that, because then I'm going to go into the next thing that I'm going to say. No, listeners know, and you know this, right? Like, there's no way I want a paper book. If I can have the digital copy, that's my preferred method, blah, blah, blah. And since I've adopted that policy, like, I get excited about going to bookstores, but then I get there and I'm not excited about being there anymore. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was in 2 bookstores last week. I was in Barnes & Noble, where I purchased a notebook, which was my primary reason for going there, was not to peruse shelves, but I did do that for a little bit, and I felt nothing. Like, I didn't feel anything. But a couple days later, I had to kill a little bit of time, and I was in a Books A Million. A BAM.
Oh, wow, yeah. BAM.
A BAM.
You were at the BAM?
I was at the BAM, and really, because I was just waiting on something, and I was like, oh, look, there's a Books A Million. I was in a mall. So walked through there, and I started feeling a little nostalgic for reading, which is going to sound really weird because I do a book review podcast. And I really feel like, I know I've said it before, hopefully won't have to say it for much longer. I read less now than I've ever read in my life, and it makes me sad.
Yeah.
And I was like just looking at some book covers, and I was kind of thinking about, like, this is going to sound like something you tell like a 10-year-old you want to read, like all these adventures that are going on in these books that I was not reading.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. That's really, it's serious.
I'm kind of laughing at myself about it, though. So I kind of want to recommit to reading more outside the podcast, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it was because of a trip to the bookstore that I think I'm finally going to do that. So my plan is to get back to reading at a minimum 1 book a week. That would include what we do here, and trying to get past that 50 per year that I used to do, like, without even thinking about before we did the podcast. So I've got to stop looking at reading as a chore, which is a little bit what book has done to me.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Well, because I have a time frame. Like, I have to have it done by then. And sometimes I think that works against me. Like, if I was just reading a book, I'd be like, I've got some time. I'm going to read this book. And now I'm like, well, I've got to have this book done by Monday. So I'm only going to read 15% today. You know what I mean? Like, that type of thing. So, but yeah, it was a little bit of a, eye-opening is the right word, but it was a revelation that I had, that I really miss reading. So I'm going to do more of it.
I was worried that you were going to say that your goal was going to be to start a second podcast, so you have to like review like one on there, one on here, and like
no.
That's how you read more.
No, not at all. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how this thing with Dino goes down, but no. Listen, you know what my second podcast idea is. I just have to buckle down and convince you that we need to do it.
All right. Did I tell you about running into an old acquaintance in the bookstore recently? Did I tell you that story?
Negative.
All right, so I posted on social media last weekend that I was in a Half Price Books, and I found a. God damn it! I have to look at it because I don't remember the name.
The house down the block by the river, next to the tree,
Yeah,
with some bushes in front of it.
the Matt Bell book, In the House Upon the Dirt Between the Lake and the Woods, and it is
so close.
a sleeved hardcover first edition. First printing, signed by Matt Bell. I was like, all right, good score. This is the same one that I found the hardcover first edition of Apathy and Other Small Victories. So,
Dude, it sucks though. So he's got a signed book and it ends up at Half Price Books.
yeah, but it was actually full price. So there was at least there was a lie involved.
Oh, okay.
Like it had been marked specially, like signed, signed by author, and like that's why it cost more or whatever.
Gotcha. Yep.
So
Not like when you pick up a copy of the booked anthology in a thrift store that someone donated.
all right. So do you remember that dude in Australia? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
He bought it on eBay. Oh yeah, whatever.
No, that's what it was. On eBay,
Adam,
yeah.
Adam, whose legs don't work's mom's fucking donated it to her church or something and ended up on eBay. Yeah. Well, now we know. Now Matt Bell knows our pain. Anyway, so I find that book. I look around. It ended up being the only book I want to buy. And this is that day that we had the Sunday that was like snowing like fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, well, it's snowing. I'm going to go driving around. And
Okay.
totally makes sense, right?
Yeah, that's
I was
you're
like,
probably the only person thinking that. That was a unique idea that day.
I was a little stir crazy. So I get up to the register and I complete my purchase, and there's a guy standing behind me, and I'm just walking. I turn to walk out, and they say, "Rob," in like a questioning way, not in like a confident way. And so I turn and I look at this person, and there's like a good 10-15 seconds of silence where I'm just looking at this person as like the gears turn, because I recognize them, but I don't know who the hell they are. Finally, I'm like, Eric? And it turns out, so this was a guy who I went to school with up through, the end of high school. And so we do this 2 minutes of like just regular chit chat catch up, like, glad handing, pleasantries, blah, blah, blah. And they say goodbye. And then I kind of go on with my life. And as I'm driving home, I'm thinking about, wow, what are the chances that I run into this dude? Even though we both live near to the town where we went to high school, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. And then I remember, like, I only really have one clear memory of this guy. And it's, so do you remember in middle school, at least for us, it doesn't happen now, I'm guessing, there was like that year in gym class where like they made you start doing the showers. Like there was you hit that age where like now you shower after gym class.
So Chicago public schools, at least in the 80s, we didn't have showers at the elementary school, which was K through 8. High school, we did.
Yeah.
And it was a requirement only before and after swimming, because we had an Olympic-sized pool.
Well, that makes sense.
So it was only mandated then. Like, you could do it, but they didn't give you a lot of time to like change after gym class. It was like 5 minutes. If you were going to shower, it was going to have to be like super fast.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, definitely like, and I don't think it was all of middle school, but 7th grade, 8th grade, something like that. There was a point where like the fucking gym teacher had to tell us how to use a towel, right? Where he's like telling you like, you got to start like drying your head, and then you work down. You work with gravity, and he's like showing us like he's like demonstrating with a dry towel on his clothed body how to use a towel. Like we haven't been showering for like the 13
like,
years leading up to
no one
this.
ever taught me. I don't know how, because you said it, and I was like, man, I'm glad I'm doing it right.
Yeah, I'm like fucking taking notes. Like, oh man, what have I been doing all this time? I've just been throwing the towels on the ground and rolling around on them.
I'm still hoping for a wipe my ass class, because I'm not sure if I'm getting that down right. I should have gone to school in the Burbs. You guys probably got that in like high school, right?
Yeah, it was junior year health class. Yeah, I'm kidding. Good Lord. So anyway, my memory of this dude has to do with the shower in middle school. So it's like the first time, the first day of gym class where like the showering after gym class was an option. And I'm already in the shower room, showering it up. And this fucking guy, Eric, who I saw at the bookstore, God, I hope he doesn't know I do a podcast, comes running in to the shower room, having forgotten to take off his socks. And he hits like the wet floor and is just like hydroplaning on one foot. He's got like 1 foot off the ground and he's like sliding on the other foot, like across, and then he falls just flat on his back, like the back equivalent of a belly flop. Mm-hmm. And then he just gets up and goes back and gets dressed because that was it.
See, your gym teacher taught you how to towel off. Didn't teach you how to shower. So he thought if I just go throw myself on the wet floor,
that's it. That's how you shower.
A little bit of water in the bathtub.
It never occurred to me that was his method.
He did that like Navy SEAL thing where like, you know, when they dive off the boat. So he was like sitting on the edge of the bathtub and I'm leaning up in my chair, right? And he just throw himself back into the bathtub and then he'd get up and he'd be like, I'm good to go.
He did have his nose pinched in his fingers now that I remember it.
Yep. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, there. We just had a revelation. I always thought that he fell on accident. You're saying this was his showering technique. Not a lot of soap action in his method, I'm going to say.
No. You know, we shower more than we should, according to studies. Yeah. Like, you're not supposed to do it, like, every day. So,
if we didn't go to bookstores, we wouldn't run into former classmates and remember them naked crashing into a room full of naked men. So
the cool thing is you went to school with someone who was in a bookstore, like whatever, 20 plus years later, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm thinking back to my high school class, and I don't know that I could say that if I went to the neighborhood I went to high school and moved into the bookstore, literally set up shop there, that I would ever see anyone I went to school with.
Well, I don't want to take any shine off of your sentiment, but I'm fairly certain he was holding comic books.
Comic books or books, bro?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that we were.
It's a lot of pictures, but yeah.
He didn't have a copy of the booked anthology in his hands.
This feels like the conversation that my girlfriend and I frequently have when someone, whenever I say the word action figure, and she feels the need to correct it to dolls. And I'm like, they're not dolls. Yeah. They're action figures. Like, and it doesn't matter. It's not like I have the action figures. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, I'll be like, oh, look at that. Look at that cool. This is a new Star Wars action figure. She'll be like, dolls. And I'm like, no, they're not dolls. And this is kind of the same conversation about comic books and real books.
Well, I want to clarify something. Is there a reason that she corrects you to dolls?
I think it's because she used to tease her brother when he was a kid.
Okay.
And she'd say, oh, look, he's playing with his dolls, which would infuriate him. And then he would have the same argument with her that I do, that they're action figures. They're not dolls.
So she just wants to emasculate dudes or something.
Pretty much.
All right.
Maybe just me. I don't know.
All right. I like it.
They're action figures. Did you have action figures? You don't strike me as the kind of kid that had action figures.
I did. Me and my brother are like a year and a half apart in age. And so I think the earliest I can remember is the He-Mans.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to ask, is what action figures were your thing, were your jam?
Heavily into the G.I. Joes. The ones that were like probably 4 or 5 inches big, and you could like unscrew them and like switch the parts around and stuff.
I totally used to do that.
Of course you did.
Yeah, custom G.I. Joes. Yeah.
Yeah, you're putting so-and-so's legs on someone else's legs, and then the rubber band breaks.
Do the legs. Yeah, the legs on that stupid rubber band. You could really only do like the legs and the arms. Like the torso and the head were kind of stuck. Yeah. I don't think you could do heads on those. I had, I think, 6 of the 8 original. Those are the 4-inch figures. Like, you know, like the ones when they were just wearing, like they were all wearing just like the green, like army green.
Yeah.
Except for like Snake Eyes and Scarlet. And like the other 6 were, oh God, I wonder if I could do this. Grunt. Shit, I can't. Hawk.
You made it one name in.
Remember. No, I'm trying to. So it was because it was Gung Ho, Scarlet, Snake Eyes, Grunt, Hawk. Shit, that's 5. No, Firefly was later. Yeah, I was really into the G.I. Joes, man. I was really into the GI Joes.
You know, I'm on eBay right now looking up.
I know you are.
That's going to be your gift exchange this year, GI Joe figures.
Nice. Get me 8 of the original ones in original packaging, if you could, please.
Oh no, I was just going to buy them loose so you could play with them.
Play with my action figures.
Yeah. Not your dolls.
Do you remember? Yeah. So I mean, we're way off here, but we went into that. There was that toy store. We were at that Danielewski reading in Chicago.
Wait, wasn't Sergeant Slaughter one of them?
So Sergeant Slaughter was later. Yes, he was a GI Joe. He was a wrestler, but they actually made him into an action figure and a GI Joe character.
Right.
We went into that weird little collectible toy store, and they just had like bins of that shit, man.
Yep.
Loose, like you could just like a buck a piece or something. I should go back down there, buy some action figures.
Oh, dude, I'm on eBay. Remember how we were just complaining about that rubber band? 50 pieces new GI Joe 3 3/4 inch replacement O-ring bands. GI Joe Cobra Action Force, $4.99 for 50 of those. You can destroy the hell out of those rubber bands. We got you covered.
Oh my god! You know what's funny is that someone's selling them now. Like I could see if there was like a collectible toy store or whatever, like an eBay store selling 50 of them at a time. That's crazy.
That's amazing. Ooh, huge GI Joe 3 3/4 vintage lot 1980s. There's got to be 60 action figures here.
Link me, please.
It's $275.
That sounds like a good deal for 60 of them.
All right, I'm sending you a link, and I'm going to change the topic.
Yes, please. For the love of God, please.
I just want to talk about something I was watching minutes before we started our conversation, because I'm very excited about this. So, like, minutes before we got on to do this episode, I finished watching. I'm one episode away from finishing season 2 of Deadwood, in anticipation of the Deadwood movie coming out on HBO May 31st. And the trailer looks great, by the way. I don't know if you watched the trailer, but
I did not.
It's like, imagine Deadwood, but everybody looks a little older and everybody's got gray hair.
Well, it's been a while, right? How many years has it been?
I mean, it's got to be between 15 and 20, right?
I don't know.
A little bit on the long side. Let's see.
Yeah.
2006 was when the series finished.
So 13, yeah, 13 years.
That's close.
You know, the most interesting, the best part of that is that this was always planned, right? Like right after they cancel it, they're like, no, we're going to do a movie. We're going to wrap it up. And for years, everyone was waiting. And then it was just a few years ago that they tore down the set.
Oh, yeah.
Like the news was they finally tore down the Deadwood set. And then everyone was like, well, that's it. No movie.
And then boom, here it goes.
And then, yeah, here's your movie. We tore down the set. We built it again. And now we can make a movie. So.
Well, the weird thing that I'm noticing now that I'm almost done with 2 seasons of it is just how many, because obviously Timothy Olyphant went on to do Justified.
Mm-hmm.
And it is probably, it's top 3 favorite TV shows for me. And I'm noticing how many people from Justified or from Deadwood are in Justified, or Justified are in Deadwood, however you want to look at it. Like, it seems like, I think I've counted like easily 9 or 10 actors.
Oh,
like,
wow.
Crossover between the 2 shows.
Is there, is it possible that it's like produced by the same people or something along those lines?
I will double check, but I don't believe so. David Milch did Deadwood. And Graham Yost did Justified, so no, It's different people. But I mean, that excellent spillover. Like the people that you would like want to see in other stuff are the ones that are, you know, showing up in Justified. So it's just so exciting to see all these people. It was cool.
That is very cool. I mean, Timothy Olyphant also went on to do the Santa Clarita Diet.
I watched the first episode of that and I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah, you didn't miss. I watched the entire first season and I think part of the second season, and yeah, no, nothing there.
That's too bad. He'll bounce back and he'll put a gun back in his hand and everything will be fine.
The problem with it is, and I don't want you to watch it just for this, but I'm pretty sure that guy was high the entire time he was on set.
Maybe you know what? Is it the way he looked? Because when he was in The Office, like in the little bits he was in The Office, he definitely had kind of like a squinty eye thing going on. So I think that's just how he is.
But he did in Justified. I don't remember ever thinking that in Justified.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Did 4 seasons of that. So I think that those other shows were like, yeah, if you want to get baked, man, go ahead.
That's possible.
So
all right.
We should probably put this this train back on the rails. Yeah, thanks for listening to an interlude episode of Booked. Next week, as promised, E.L. James, the Mister, with guest host Dino Parenti. Super excited about this.
Me too. I can't wait to not do anything for the episode next week. It's going to be a highlight of the entire podcast for me. So that's going to wrap it up for this. Join them next week. It's weird to say. Join everybody but me next week for a review of E.L. James. Till then, I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livia Snedden. Keep reading.